Welcome to Voodoo Whiskey Gaming, and this is my lit review of Them and Us. I played on the PC via Steam because, well, it's a PC game. And I'm a little annoyed because it went on sale after I bought it. So let's get into the story. You play as Alicia. She has been imprisoned because, well, she was accused of doing something really horrible. But of course she claims she did not do it. Fortunately for her, during a prison transport, well, the bus gets hijacked basically and crashes. And while she escapes, unfortunately for her, she passes out and wakes up in a spooky ass mansion. While exploring this mansion, she stumbles upon a whole lot of zombies and a whole lot of weird cult stuff. So the first thing I'm going to say about the story is, it was enjoyable enough. It wasn't necessarily something that fully pulled me in, but it was more than compelling enough. But let's get into the audio, and the first thing I'm going to say is the music is pretty good. I like it. I think it works well with the game. Same goes for the sound effects, although I will say there were a couple of missing sound effects that I happened to notice, but they were never major things, but they are there and they are a little noticeable. Apart from some missing sound effects, I do think overall they do a good job. Since this is a survival horror game, I think, sound effects are important, and the spookier sound effects, they're there. When it comes to the voiceover work, some characters are done better than others, but none of it is legendary in a positive or negative way. Let's get into the gameplay mechanics and whatnot, and this is an interesting survival horror game because you can play it one of two ways. You can go with a third-person over-the-shoulder camera, or you can go old-school semi-fixed camera tank controls. And because I discovered this game on a list of games with a ye olde Resident Evil vibe, I went with the fixed camera. But it does play a lot like a classic Resident Evil, which is clearly where its inspiration comes from. There are even parts of the mansion you wake up in that give you that vibe. Different from some survival horror games is, I found that health was generally very scarce, but ammo far less so. I mean, there was a while where it was scarce, but eventually I was pretty well swimming in ammo. Unfortunately, I do have some complaints with it because it's very inconsistent with how it guides you. I don't necessarily expect it to hold your hand, but when you're saying stuff like, you need the Minerva key to open this door, but then other things you're like, it looks like something could go here, but there's no clue as to what that something could possibly be. In my case, it was a blue book that I was carrying around in my inventory and didn't know that it went there, because there was nothing that implied that this book would go there, and looking at the item that I needed to put the book in didn't really scream, hey, a book will fit here. But it's also inconsistent in dealing with enemies, because a lot of the time you're kind of encouraged to avoid enemies. Not necessarily encouraged, but it's pretty easy to do, so why waste your ammo? But then there are enemies where you absolutely need to kill them to get items that will progress you, but you don't necessarily know which enemies that is. For example, I went into an area, grabbed some items, there was an enemy down there, just a normal zombie, so I just left it because he wasn't really in my way. Later I found out I absolutely needed to kill him to get a very specific item. And I think that's one thing that works to the detriment of this game, is they just didn't hit a good balance of guiding you without holding your hand. That being said, I fully recommend using a guide if you do decide to play this game, which I ended up doing, and it made the experience so much better. Since I played it through Steam, there's a good guide there on Steam that I was very happy with, so it really improved my overall experience. But I got into it a little bit there. Survival horror games, you know how it works. You go find items, you solve puzzles, you get new items, you explore, you deal with enemies or avoid them. It plays very much like a traditional survival horror game, a classic one from the 90s and early 2000s. Let's get into the controls, and as I said, I played it with fixed camera and tank controls, and I think it worked really well. It felt far better than any of the classic Resident Evils that clearly inspired it, and yes, I have gone back and played a couple of them, and man, if they had these tank controls, it would feel much better. And I mean, it sounds silly, but really, it boils down to your movement and the responsivity of these controls. It's fantastic. Yes, I got myself hurt. Yes, I got myself killed, and that was generally on me rather than the controls not doing what I needed them to do. And last but not least, we'll get into the graphics and visuals. No, this is not the most graphically intense game you are ever going to play, but for a game that's going for a more retro vibe, it looks pretty damn good. It actually looks not too bad. I would say the biggest issue I ran into was definitely textures popping in. There were plenty of times where the textures took a while to load in. That and a lot of screen tearing. There was a lot of screen tearing. If you turn on the VSync, you don't get as much screen tearing, but I was still getting more than I would have liked. It was disappointing in that sense. But I think overall the design was excellent. The characters, a little bit generic, but that's fine. I didn't necessarily need them to stand out. I don't think this felt like necessarily a franchise game in my opinion. But the creature design is really good. There's a good number of different zombies and other creatures that you will run into throughout the game, and they feel unique, and they work in the world that they're building. But then you also have, well, the world that you're in, and I think it's really well done. I loved the mansion. It does at times play a little too close to what it's, paying homage to. But at the same time, it looks really good, the lighting is really good, the layout is very well done. And once you get out of the mansion, I feel the same about all of that. I think the visual design to the puzzles, to the grounds that you are on, to the spooky stuff going on, I think it all works very well. And I gotta say, overall, I really think that they captured something cool, and I hope they, make another game, because they clearly have a good eye for what they're doing. So let's get into the wrap-up. I don't think this game does anything to necessarily revolutionize survival horror games. It's very clearly set to be an homage to classic Resident Evil, but with their own story, and I think they do a very good job with that overall. I don't necessarily love having to use guides in games, but I definitely felt the need to do that here, and once I did start doing that, it greatly improved my overall experience. Which admittedly is a little disappointing to me because, like I said, I like to be able to go through a game by myself. That being said, if you're looking for a classic Resident Evil experience or even a slightly modernized Resident Evil experience with like the over-the-shoulder camera, I think this is a fun game. I think it's actually worth the price. As of recording, it is on sale on Steam and will be for a few more days, but even having paid full price, I'm happy that I played it. It was a fun throwback. Okay, so in the comments down below, why don't you tell me, what's your favorite non-Resident Evil but Resident Evil-esque game? And as always, thanks for watching. If you enjoyed the video, please hit that like button. And if you like what I'm doing in general, share and subscribe. Have a good one.